Good morning, gearheads. Welcome to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM. It's John Massengale sitting in the studio in Austin, Texas, and joined in studio by Mr. Kaiser. How are you, Les Kaiser?
Good morning. Doing well, man. Great looking sunset coming over, sunrise over Austin, Texas. I saw the sunset last night too, but I did take a nap in between the two.
I did. I shot a photo. Hey, Bob Varsha, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, thanks. I'm here in sunny Watkins Glen, New York, where our colleague Jonathan Green is busy on the microphone over at the racetrack with Trans Am and SVRA. But I'm ready for Formula One.
I am too, man. It's exciting. We had another sprint race weekend, and we're at the Temple of Speed, and you got to always look forward to that. But I think I want to start by talking about the sprint race weekend itself. It definitely had some impact this time, and I'm still trying to decide if I like it better or not. It certainly has been very interesting.
You and a lot of other folks.
Yeah. I think everybody's still on the fence there. But again, going back to what we talked about the first time they did this at Silverstone, is that I do applaud F1 for trying something different. But no, well, Bob, let's talk about it. You know, if you're Mercedes and your Red Bull and some of the others, you may not love this because of what's happened. But hey, I just want to also mention we got Dave O'Neill, who just joined us, the former Haas F1 team manager. Good morning, Mr. O'Neill. How are you?
I'm very good. Yourself?
I am doing great. Excited about some Formula One, watching the sunrise over the Austin skyline this morning.
Dave looks like he's ready for a Sunday full of football.
Bit of soccer.
I mean, American football.
American football, yeah.
Well, everybody, hope you have a nice warm cup of coffee, a cup of maybe a cup of Curva Grande, and sit in and listen to what we got, because we got for an hour here. We're going to talk Formula One ahead of the Italian Grand Prix. And Dave, I'm glad you joined us, because I was just about to talk about the sprint race itself, whether or not I'm still on the fence, whether I like it or I don't like it. I like the fact that we're doing something different, and I'm excited to see what they do. But put your team manager hat back on and talk about what you think of it from the front of the grid or the back of the grid. But what do you think so far? We've had two of these.
Well, I don't think it's a bad thing at all. More of a fan now. And I think it certainly changes the grid around, as it's shown this morning, as we can see. Probably gives a few more people a bit more of a chance of scoring the odd point towards the back of the grid as well. So I think all in all, for the fans, it's great. You know, get that extra race. For a team, I mean, getting the team into a position where they can cope with the extra race. There's always why you can't do it. It's too much of this and too much work, and there won't be enough parts and all this. But it's the same as when they introduced the curfews. You know, there was a big hullabaloo about that, and then once everyone got their thinking caps on and got everything sorted, it wasn't too bad. So make the bits last longer, so you don't have to change them as frequently. And but that's what we all want, isn't it? Just more races. So I think it's a good idea, and it will certainly change and give some people advantages, disadvantages, and also hopefully maybe even give Haas a chance of getting some points.
There you go.
All right, there's the perfect ending statement for the topic that I was discussing this week with somebody. Getting Haas some points. How do we do that? Well, how about on that point for the fastest lap? Why do we have to limit it to only the top 10? How about anybody on the grid knock out the fastest lap at some point through the race and you get a point? I was like, that's a good idea. Those backfield markers could really put the big push in towards the end of the race. And what are your thoughts on that, Dave?
I was just thinking while you were trying to get my answer together, and I think the only reason they don't do it is because you'd have 10 cars on the pits just going in towards the end of the race, pulling fuel out of the car or whatever they were doing. And then you'd only have 10 cars in the race. You get another 10 coming out, and there's a good chance there would be chaos at that point. I guess that's why they did that.
Interesting.
Bob, I saw your thinking cap come on there when Les said that. What do you think?
Well, I was thinking about the rule in the race. You have to finish in the top 10 if you're going to get that point. So those are your 10 eligible drivers right there. And the guys toward the back of the top 10 are going to drop out of that position while they pit. So, it's an interesting situation, and it can be volatile, as we saw in Zandvoort just a week ago, where Bottas pitted and threatened to get that fast lap point away from his teammate, Lewis Hamilton. Then Hamilton pitted with 1 lap to go and was able to put in a clutch lap and take it back. So, yeah, I think it can be a little bit thrilling. Listen, change is hard for everybody, and so it's hard for people to get their heads around some of these new things. I'm delighted to hear that Dave has come around, as I have, to the idea of this sprint qualifying thing. It seems to be pretty ingrained in the series. Ross Brawn, the technical boss, has said the drivers love it, and they're gonna keep doing it. Obviously, your feelings are going to be dictated by your results. I'm sure Valtteri Bottas thinks it's terrific because he's going to start. At least he qualified on pole, so he's got the opportunity. Although now he's changed engines, he's going to go to the back. Lewis Hamilton got a horrendous start in the sprint qualifier and lost positions, so he's starting somewhere on the grid he'd rather not be. So, yeah, it all depends on what kind of a day you have.
Well, we're going to get to see it firsthand here in Austin at the USGP.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought Brazil was the last race. It's Austin?
Well, they were talking about Austin being on this experimental trip for sprint races. But yeah, let's confirm that, Les.
I'm digging in and checking it now.
Well, look, guys, one of the big things they were talking about, let's improve the show, right? That's FOM and the gang up there saying we're going to improve the show. And I'll tell you what, it certainly has improved it on Friday for sure. And we've affected like you mentioned, Bob, we've affected the grid, and you too, Dave. You've affected what's happened on Saturday now dramatically, right? Because how many times are we going to see Lewis Hamilton not going backwards, not moving forwards on a Saturday? He's so good and mistake free, but made a mistake and did not have a good start. Started on the dirty side of the grid. But I really liked the graphic that Formula One put out. Speaking of him starting on the dirty side and not having a good start, they showed the 0 to 200 kilometers graphic where Bottas was like 4.2 seconds and Hamilton was almost a full second. So think about that. In the first, 5 seconds of the race, Lewis Hamilton has already given up a second to Bottas and essentially to Max Verstappen, because he basically had the same start as Bottas. It was like 4.3 versus 4.2. But it's affected the show on Friday. I think a lot more people are watching because it's the qualifying format, and then I think you've got right now more people watching on Saturday because it's a sprint race. So let's just see if they keep it, what it looks like a year down the road. But don't you guys think there's more people watching?
Oh, definitely. I think the numbers show that, particularly here in the United States. And it's changed things up. And, those who were decrying the fact that Formula One was so predictable and such a parade and all that sort of thing. Okay, now you've got your change. You've got this sprint qualifying format being trialed. You've got attacks out there in the racetrack. You've got low fuel runs on, the softest tires. And on the sprint qualifying weekends, all the old tire rules about which tire you set your fast lap on, determining what tire you use at the start, that's all gone. Everybody has complete tire freedom as they go to the grid for today's race. So it adds that element of uncertainty that people have been crying for. And now you can't cry because you got it.
All right. Hey, quick step back onto that sprint comment. Currently, it is not showing sprint for anyone, U.S., Mexico, or Brazil. But I compared it to the schedule that Formula One publishes, the weekend schedule. And for Italy, it definitely shows that there are practices, and there's a qual, and then there's sprint, and then there's the race. So question mark is still out there, though. Yes, absolutely. There are questions about where the sprint race is going to be included in July. they did state that Austin is a consideration for that.
Yeah, I knew that we were, but
Actually, I think they would say possibility. We've heard that
Yeah.
word a few times this year about Austin things.
hey, Bob Varsha, you talked about the tires, but Dave O'Neill, I want to ask you, why did Hamilton not start on the softs? You would think, even though he's on the dirty side, but if he's on the softs, you think he would have easily been P3, P2. Why do you think they didn't start him on the soft tires? I think they had plenty of tires.
I think so, and I have no real good reason why you wouldn't do that, but maybe they wanted to save them for the feature race. Would be the only reason I could come up with on that. That side, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I've heard nobody come up with a good answer for that. And I mean, look, you've now effectively increased Max Verstappen's chances of extending his narrow lead pretty dramatically with that one decision of not using the soft tires, because it was such a dramatic different start for Hamilton. But hey, guys, what about Daniel Ricciardo? The giant smile is on the front row. That's pretty awesome. First time since 2018, I think, Bob, right?
Yeah, for him, and the first time McLaren has had both cars up there since 2012 or so. I mean, this is the McLaren of old. They've done really well on this racetrack, both Ricciardo and Lando Norris, and it's great to see. I mean, they're going to be nipping at the heels of Verstappen and Hamilton, and and the Ferraris. And remember, that's the battle after the big two teams. You got Ferrari and McLaren neck and neck for a third in the Constructors' Championship as things stand. So yeah, there's a lot of storylines between those two.
I think the last time McLaren was in this position, Lewis Hamilton was up there, right?
Yeah, it was Hamilton and Jenson Button or Fernando Alonso. No, Jenson Button, I think.
Yes. So yes.
2012,
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yep.
Also, another good story from Saturday was it was a pretty big time crash from Carlos Sainz and Ferrari getting the car back ready and end up finishing 7th in the sprint race. So you've got Ferrari 6 and 7. And what do you think about, I heard some discussion about Carlos Sainz driving style, how it's so different from Leclerc. And let me ask you, Dave, what about the discussion was about how he has such an aggressive style, how he's throwing the car into the corners and just has a really aggressive style, and maybe it's not suited for that Ferrari car.
Yeah, I think if you look back to the crash, there's I think there's a good chance the car hit the ground on the plank quite hard, and then he had a little bit of lock on, and it kind of just turned the car left into the barrier. I think that was, Monza has some strange crashes, but when it comes to driving styles, I don't know. He can't be that off when it comes to driving, because they are pretty similar matched time wise. Leclerc, I think, is just he's ahead a little bit just purely because he's been there for an extra season, and he grew up in the Ferrari family. So maybe there's a little bit of getting used to the car. I'm sure it's kind of designed towards Leclerc's driving style for sure, but it's not something Sainz can't get used to.
Dave, I got a question for you. As we're seeing the silly season play out, I got a question. The design of the 22 car, how much adjustability remains at this period of the development or the construction of that 22 car to accommodate a driver that is vastly different than the one that's sitting there now?
You mean size or driving style?
All the above.
All the above, okay. Well, round about August time is pretty much where the car is, I'd say probably 90% done. All the cooling packages will be done. That's kind of the most important thing we talk about. And again, this is going to be very difficult for 2022, getting it right. You know, all the last few years, or last sort of 6 or 7 years with the current car, you've just been making tweaks to the cooling system, whereas you've got a completely different car. You know, you've got bigger wheels on the car. So chassis wise, I would have thought August time is when the chassis is going to be sort of signed off on the drawing board, if you like. And then by that time, hopefully, you know, that's why you see some of the teams making the driver choices for the height of the drivers, you know, how big the cockpit's going to be, how much movement they have in there, you know, the seat, etc., where they're going to put the fire extinguisher, how forward the bulkhead is in the chassis, where they get their rigidity, and then of course the chassis goes off and gets its crash tests, or initial crash tests. So the nose, the chassis, and then the rear crash structure will be off getting their crash tests in R&D. And then the final crash tests will happen towards the latter part of the year. Typically in the UK, Myra, they tend to do them. But the rest of the car, as I say, I think the cooling, they'll carry on tweaking. And of course, you know, the interesting bit is as soon as these things hit the ground for the first time, they'll all be in the same place together. And that's you'll see who's done the best job for winter testing. Wing-wise, downforce levels, they've pretty much got decent data on those with the CFD that they're producing. And of course, all the wind tunnel models are pretty clever now as well. So I guess in answer to your question, Les, the big bulky items tend to be done August, September, October, and then the fine tuning happens all the way through until the winter testing starts in February. I think they're going to Barcelona again this year. I think I'm right in that.
All righty, excellent. Well, the reason I brought that up, they put George Russell in the car back in December in the Mercedes. And at that point, he had to wear smaller shoes, boots, driving boots, because there was a significant difference between he and Lewis's foot box requirements.
Yeah.
And basically, they're not going to be able to do that. And there was some concern that Mercedes is going to have to back up and redo the foot box in that car. So,
been there, done that myself. Yeah. All right, guys, we need to take a break.
Go ahead.
We need to go ahead and take a break, Bob. But when we come back, we got some news to talk about. Power unit news. Think about that, gentlemen, if he wants to get excited. And we're also going to talk about news of the week, which includes the silly season that you brought up, Les, because there was lots of movement. You listen to Speed City F1 back after these messages.
This is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
That little bumper from Max Verstappen was taken right here at Circuit of the Americas in the Media Center a couple of years ago, I think 2019. All right, gentlemen, we went to break. I said we had some news. Depends on how you define news. There was a statement put out about an hour ago, and it said, from the Formula One, it said, today a meeting took place involving the FIA, Formula One, and existing and prospective power unit suppliers on the potential new power unit. There's lots to discuss. Les, I know you're grinning ear from ear. You're about to explode. So tell us your thoughts first.
Hey, you know, this is really something that we've discussed a few times, is that with the changes made, it gives the opportunity for other ones. And, you know, hang my hat, wishing for Porsche to come to the grid. But what were you seeing in it that excited you?
Well, number one, I knew you were going to be excited that Porsche might be coming in, but I love the discussion. You know, when I first heard this power unit and the word emotive, which is what they said they were going to try to bring into this, is more cylinders and more RPM. I mean, if you're talking emotion in your power unit, electric doesn't do it for me or most anybody, I don't think.
You could say the polar opposite of a golf cart, right? Or a dental drill.
The polar opposite of a golf cart.
Steady on.
Sorry, Uncle Bob.
And I want to ask Bob and Dave about their opinion on this, but I also want to give out the phone number, 512-643-5483, because this topic I want listeners' opinion on. What do they want? What does everybody want? But
Rattle my chest as it goes by.
yeah. Well, Bob, let's start with you. Bob Varsha, what do you think about the power unit news, first of all, and what they said in that short little sentence, and what you hope to see into this new power unit?
Well, it's great news that Audi and Porsche are both sitting in on these meetings. Doesn't mean they're coming, but at least it means they're interested, or they're covering their corporate flanks in terms of their options down the road and so forth. As far as what they're going to come up with, Toto Wolff at Mercedes said, we're willing to back off on some of our technology, particularly the motor generator unit that recaptures energy through the heat of the turbocharger. Apparently, Mercedes has made some great strides in that direction, because Toto Wolff considered it a sort of a sacrifice on their part, if you will, that they were willing to make in order to get another one or two engine manufacturers into the series. As far as what the technology ought to be down the road, I don't have this negative reaction that a lot of people do to the idea of electrification, or at least hybridization. Yeah, we all love the sound of big noisy motors and that sort of thing, but I mean, you've got to face the reality. The money that makes the wheels go round comes from the manufacturers. The manufacturers are committed to electrification. It's a wonderful technology. If the only thing that bothers you is the fact that it's quiet, well, small price to pay, I think, if you've got the kind of torque numbers and the kind of horsepower numbers, and the fact that Formula One could be made even more exciting by electrification. So, I really don't have a problem with it. And you certainly don't want Formula One to become a dinosaur running internal combustion engines with their screaming engine sounds, while the rest of the world is tootling around or flashing around, if you will, in electrified cars. And if the manufacturers don't get what they want out of the sport, they're certainly not going to invest in Formula One or rather any other kind of motorsport if they're not dealing in the technologies that they try to sell to you and me in their dealer showrooms.
Well, I'm going to get to you in a second, Dave, but Bob, I want to respond to what you said, and that is, I've been thinking a lot about what the future is going to hold. And yes, our commuter cars are going to be electric. There's no doubt about it. They're going to be electric. It makes way too much sense. But I don't think you're going to see Ferrari, Porsche. Porsche's going a lot electric, but Ferrari, Lamborghini, and the true exotics go away from internal combustion engines. In fact, I saw an article about how the Italian government is talking about making an exception for keeping it to internal combustion engines for Ferrari and maybe Alfa Romeo. I don't know, but I think it's going to be your exotics are going to still be hybrids, and there's so much cool technology in the MGU and the way they have electric turbo acceleration, where you have literally no turbo lag. There's all that cool technology that still fits in the internal combustion engine. But yeah, to me, the hybrid is the ultimate, because you get the best of both worlds. You're going to get the top end of an internal combustion. You're going to get the noise, the feel, the sound, the mechanical. I want my mechanical, because electric motor, stators and whatever don't excite me. But
so
the torque
your finger
does.
on one.
Yeah, but exactly. Good, nice point there. But the torque does, and the output does. But that's why the hybrid to me is the dream powertrain. But Dave, I've been saying I'm going to go to you. So what do you think about? First of all, what do you think about this news story? This little statement from Formula One.
Well, yeah, I mean, those guys would be stupid not to be in the meetings just to make sure they're not missing out, and make sure they, they could be in there to get involved at the right time. I think it's really good that the doors are open for these things to happen now. But I guess the shame of it all is, I can see both sides with the electric side, and then the shame of it is if you saw the technology that was in a Formula One power unit and how much it's been developed over the last 5 years, when they first, 2013, I think, when they first put KERS in, and how fast Formula One have developed it and got this huge amount of power out of something so small. I think that's the bit which is the shame, being out of Formula One, but still knowing what happens in it. Is if you could unwrap the power unit and show the power and the ingenuity that's gone into all these small modules that have been bolted onto the side of the power unit is the interesting bit for me, in the technology and how quick it grows. The battery thing has still got a long way to go. For sure, it's doing well. I just don't think you're going to see an Audi doing 24 hours of Le Mans anytime soon, just purely because of the battery range, I guess. But I'd like to see Formula One, maybe put a bit more electric in the F1, engine bay area, and still have the combustion engine a little bit smaller, maybe, and shoot off in that direction.
Dave's got it. A 1.2 liter 12-cylinder.
Hey, that's what I've been saying. I don't care how small it is, honestly.
Yeah.
I want it. I mean, yeah, I guess I don't want it to be too small, and that's too small, but I want it to be 12 cylinders or 10 cylinders or even 8, but I want RPM. I want that sound of something spinning up to 18,000 RPMs. But we have a caller.
Yeah.
We have a caller on the line. We have Clem from Virginia, and I want to welcome him to the show. Clem, what do you think about all this?
Good morning, gentlemen. It's good to be on the air. I love listening to you on Sunday mornings.
Thank you.
I have a crazy question about qualifying. It seems like the next quantum leap in qualifying beyond sprint races is field inversion. And I have this insane back-of-the-envelope idea. Invert the lead 6, then invert the middle 6, then invert the trailing 8. And it's probably so insane that even the backmarker teams wouldn't go for it because of the uncertainty. But it would certainly make for very interesting qualifying and exciting passing in the race. Is anything like that feasible with any of the teams?
Ooh.
What do you think? What do you think, Bob Varsha?
No, I don't think so. I mean, first of all, think of the complexity that you just outlined. Do you think Formula One's going to want its fans around the world on television or at the racetrack trying to figure out who's going to start where based on where they are? And aside from that, there's the competitive aspect itself. Pretty soon you're going to have drivers trying to figure out not how to get to the front and win, but how they need to, in qualifying, how they can find the position they need to be in so that when the inversion happens, they're up toward the front. I mean, it would become a strategic nightmare, and it's particularly appropriate to bring that up on this weekend because Monza's famous for the cars queuing up in a line and getting in each other's way, all looking for an open piece of track in their qualifying efforts. I mean, we just in recent years, we saw a nightmare of half a dozen cars or so not even getting to start their second push lap because they were being so coy going around the circuit trying to find an open piece of racetrack. So I think all those kinds of inversions wouldn't fly. It's great after the short track.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Bob. I think that's going to be pretty tricky. But Clem, we got to go to a break. But real quick, what do you think about the idea of this power unit? What do you want to see? Do you want to see more cylinders? Do you want to see all electric? What do you want to see?
From what you gentlemen just said about 12 cylinders, 1.2 liter, I think that sounds really exciting. I like Formula E. Not that big a fan of Formula E. I think the hybrid motors have worked out much better than I ever thought they would. And what you fellows were talking about sounds like a great plan to me.
Well, we shall see. Hopefully, we'll continue to get more news. But Clem, thanks for calling in. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, gentlemen, let's go ahead and get a break in. Before we do, I want to read a message from our sponsor because the Speed City F1 pre-race show on SiriusXM is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Use the cloud to secure your team in the office, at the track, or anywhere with crowdstrike.com/anywhere.
Hello to everyone, this is Gunther Steiner, this is Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM.
All right, welcome back to the show. I was watching Dave O'Neill and Bob Varsha looking longfully at the television at Monza, and you both were commenting on that. I want to ask you first, Dave. I mean, I know it's just a special place, isn't it?
Yes, very special. Starting from doing the track walk, obviously any normal track walk, it's like, oh, here we go again, walk around the track, point out curbs and all the holes in the track. But Monza's pretty special. You always end up going to the banking. So you come out the pits, go through down to the first chicane, and then try and walk the banking. I don't know if you've done it, Bob, but it's the steepest thing you could climb at any race circuit. It kind of takes your shoes off, and then if you don't run down it, you'll fall down it.
Right.
Roll down it, yeah.
Fabulous.
It's fabulous, yeah. And then just the build up to the weekend, the Italian fans, they let them in a little bit closer through the tunnel. There's a huge amount of camping there, and the camping's quite close to the side of the track. It's in a park. Not many people kind of know that, but it's a huge park. It's got 2 swimming pools in it, and people use it for running every morning and scooting across the short ways through the city. But yeah, it's a huge atmosphere. And of course, when you go out of the second chicane and around down to the Parabolica, you got the walls around the outside, and it's just steeped in history. And then the more you walk around inside the park, the more of the old circuit you kind of bump into. Yeah, I love it there.
Yeah, it's the history part is what really speaks to me. I mean, this has been a part of Formula One since the beginning, a part of Grand Prix racing since before there was Formula One. And it's like that other great Italian contribution to our culture, and that is opera. There's tragedy involved. I mean, America's 2 Formula One world champions, Phil Hill and Mario Andretti, both clinched at Monza on weekends where their teammates were killed in unfortunate accidents. And I used to get in trouble with certain fans when I was calling these races on various networks. Why do you talk about death at Monza? Because it's a part of the fabric of the place. Jochen Rindt lost his life here and went on to be world champion posthumously. It's not pleasant, but it's fact and it's history. And the track is just wonderful. It's a little community, a little shopping area on the interior of the racetrack with everything any racing fan could ever want. I went to the track once for a press event with Derek Bell, with whom I was calling some Formula One races at the time. Derek, of course, not only a great world champion racing driver, but also a former Ferrari driver. And you walk up to one of the volunteers, one of the Italian equivalent of the yellow shirts at Indianapolis. And this old fella who's been wearing his yellow jacket and, checking people's credentials at the gate sees Derek Bell. Signore Derek Bell, oh, it's so great to see you again. I mean, this guy remembers Derek Bell racing a Ferrari at Monza 40 years ago. That's it. It's just such a part of the culture. It's just a fabulous place. And the sound echoing off the trees as you walk around back on the track. Hobbs and I went there once. David drove in, I think it was the last race to actually incorporate that huge banking. He was driving as the Gulf GT40. And he said it was the most amazing thing. You get a sense of watching the Frankenheimer movie Grand Prix with James Garner, where they ran the cars up on the banking. It's just phenomenal.
Obviously steeped in history, and what would Formula One be without Ferrari? I know that's a whole other discussion, but without Ferrari in the Italian Grand Prix, and again back to the engines and sounds of Ferrari, I can never imagine Ferrari all electric. So let's hope that never happens.
Here's just to kind of wrap up my thoughts on that. Here's what I think is going to happen is they're going to drive to a point that they say internal combustion engine can only be worth 25% of the total power of the vehicle. I think that's kind of where we're headed, is to start driving that percentage down so it plays less impact, but it's obviously still required or still included.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an idea. I still think that the exotic road cars are going to help drive this, because I think they're not going to go away. I can't imagine them completely going away.
Well, they said
one of our listeners, Kevin Kelly, messaged us. By the way, you can always tweet at us or hit us on Facebook. He was saying that, and I've read this about Shell coming up with a completely carbon neutral synthetic fuel. We've heard lots of that discussion going on too. So if you eliminate the carbon footprint of an internal combustion engine, it's just there for fun, right? Because electric is going to be more efficient or range. There's range issues like Dave mentioned with Le Mans, but
As long as we can still run our classic American muscle cars in them.
yeah, there you go. I agree with that. Hey, we talked about some news, and we touched on the engine thing, obviously, but what about the silly season? Because we had a pretty dramatic week in the silly season, starting with George Russell being confirmed going to Mercedes, Albon to Williams, Bottas to Alfa Romeo. I mean, Bob, I want to get your take on all this. Pretty exciting week along that front.
Yeah, interesting to watch all this play out. And since the announcements came so close together, starting with the announcement that Bottas would go to Alfa Romeo, you got the sense that this was all kind of choreographed. Everybody was just waiting for the first domino to fall. And now it appears the only seat still up for grabs is the one Antonio Giovinazzi is in as Bottas's future teammate at Alfa. And apparently Giovinazzi is not the prime candidate for that seat. It's a young Chinese driver who I believe is in the F2 championship right now. And I know I could never pronounce his name properly, so I won't try. But you've also got Nick de Vries, who many people thought might get the Williams seat, the Formula E champion and Mercedes associated driver, might find himself in that seat as well. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, Dave and Bob, you didn't mention Haas because they haven't made it official that they're sticking with the same drivers. That's right, Dave? They haven't said officially?
I haven't heard it officially. I just know that, I know. I think that the reason they won't change is just purely the money that comes in from both of the drivers. So in order to keep the team rolling, I would have thought you need 30 in your back pocket to get a drive there. So
yeah, and we talked on that a lot. We wanted our Haas F1 team to stay in Formula One, and well, this is how they made that happen. But yeah, we all knew that this was more than likely the scenarios that were going to happen. We didn't know for sure where Bottas was going to go, but the big ones we knew that it looked like George was going to go to Mercedes. What do you think about all that, Les?
That doesn't surprise me. I'm going to recall, because I'm good at it with this one driver. Remember me when Albon didn't get a signature? I pointed at the fence and said he'll be back. Yeah, he's back. There's no way Albon could drift away from the grid. Too much talent. And then he goes over and he wins the Nürburgring DTM race. His first year in that series, proving again he's a serious driver. He'll be back. And here we go.
Speaking of Giovinazzi, he had a good sprint race and finished ahead of Sergio Perez.
He really has come alive as Giovinazzi. He's in the Ferrari plan. It's a Ferrari team. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't know what helped him vault from, for the second half of the grid up into a threat for a top 10 start week in and week out. But whatever it is, they need to keep feeding him that. And I just took a quick look at my book because I thought I had heard about this, and now I see a story about it. Ferrari CEO Louis Camilleri has announced there will be an all-electric Ferrari street car, but not before 2025. So, gentlemen, the winds of change are blowing.
There you go. Well, Antonio lost a bet. Remember this last year? The spring of last year, he lost a bet. Had to cut his hair.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I don't know. Is it that strong? Are we talking Samson here?
I don't know.
I want to...
but it's...
I was just going to point out something, Bob, is that how we're talking about Nikita Mazepin. We're talking about how the Haas F1 team is probably going to keep him for next year. I noticed, and I want to talk all about this in the next segment, Nikita Mazepin made up the most places, in the sprint race of any driver. He did the best. So there's a lot of interesting discussion about that. We did that on the last sprint race, talking about the difference between qualifying and sprint results. And that's a really good discussion that I just want to touch on because we didn't touch on that when we talked about the sprint race. and also talk about the downforce, and the toe is such an important part of Monza. So we'll talk about those. Let's go ahead and get a break in, and you're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM, and we'll be back after these messages.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
You're listening to Speed City F1 on Sirius XM.
All right, we're about 15 minutes away from the Formula One Italian Grand Prix at Monza. And I was just looking to see, there's some celebrities at the race. Usain Bolt is there. Vin Diesel is there. I think that's all that I've... Oh, and I think there was a sprint. I'm not a track and field
Yeah,
kind of
another
guy.
Olympian was there, I think.
Hey, speaking of Olympics and track and field and the medals you get, did you guys notice the medals that they gave to the podium winners of the sprint race? Did you hear what Max Verstappen said about his medal?
I remember laughing at it. I can't remember what he said.
He said, it's the first medal I've ever received in my life, because I don't see him running track or doing the other kind of things that you do in the high school and middle school to get your medal, but he got his first medal as P2 in the sprint race. I thought that was funny.
He didn't get perfect attendance in Sunday school or anything like that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hey, Bob, do you want to run down, speaking of sprint race and the starting grid, you want to run down those for us? I love it when you do that.
Okay, I'd be glad to. Of course, Valtteri Bottas went flag to flag in the qualifying race, but he's going to change an engine and move to the back. So that puts Max Verstappen on pole position at a race where he's never been in the top four before. And alongside Daniel Ricciardo, and on row 2, you've got Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton. We talked about what a great qualifying effort that is for McLaren. Hamilton probably pretty unhappy with a lot of work to do in today's race. Then Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz Jr. in the 2 Ferraris. Antonio Giovinazzi with another great qualifying effort, qualified 8th. He qualified 8th and then finished 10th in the qualifying race that's not a race. But so he'll be up in the 7th position. Followed by Sergio Perez, who the team lauded at Red Bull because he gave up his shot at a good push lap in order to provide a tow for his teammate Max Verstappen in qualifying back on Friday. Lance Stroll finished 10th in the qualifying race. Fernando Alonso 11th, and Sebastian Vettel 12th. Then Esteban Ocon and Nicolas Latifi on row 7, George Russell and Yuki Tsunoda, and Nick Mazepin and Robert Kubica on the 9th row, and then Mick Schumacher, who will start alongside, well, he may not start alongside. We're not sure if Bottas is going to start from the pit lane after that engine change. We understand that Pierre Gasly in the AlphaTauri will start from the pit lane. And that brings up another great point. All of the drivers essentially have used up their allowed 3 internal combustion engines this season. They can still use the old ones from their rotation for Friday practice and things like that. But if they take a 4th engine, they're going to have to go to the back. And so Gasly is doing that. Bottas is doing that. We're going to see a lot more of that, which raises an interesting question about what kind of an impact those engine penalties are going to have on the World Championship, because, Verstappen and Hamilton are also going to be taking new power unit components here in this final stretch of races.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the sprint race and the way that shook things up. So I'm not going to argue with that. Hey, let me squeeze in a sponsor message here. Has your workforce moved from the office to the home or the garage, or maybe a rented cabin with open Wi-Fi? If your company has expanded outside the office and moved all your applications to the cloud, there's a whole new world of threats you have to worry about, including ransomware. CrowdStrike revolutionized security by harnessing the speed and power of the cloud to identify and stop the most advanced cyber attacks, even those that have never been seen before. So now you can work securely anywhere. Try CrowdStrike Falcon free today and protect your data and employees anywhere. Welcome to Anywhere. CrowdStrike. We stop breaches. Access the CrowdStrike Falcon platform free at crowdstrike.com/anywhere. All right. Well, Dave O'Neill, I want to get your pick your brain a little bit here about about, we've done this before, but I want you to talk about what we're seeing, what's happening right now. What are the teams going through? You were with the Haas F1 team for a long time, and other teams in Formula One, but we're now 10 minutes from the start of the race. What's going on in the team manager's head? What's everybody doing at this point?
Okay, so I mean, the last hour before the start of the race goes, typically goes along like 10 minutes. It's so quick. It just happens so quick. And of course, if you have any problems, it even goes quicker. But 10 minutes in, the drivers will start getting in at 8 minutes to go, certainly with the Haas team. They'll get bolted in. The systems will be checked on the car. So the radio, the drink system, they'll look at firing the cars up at 5 minutes to go, making sure that all the systems are working there. With 3 minutes to go, all the wheels have to be fitted to the car, and 2 minutes to go, you're looking at putting the car on the ground. 1 minute to go, the car has to be on the ground. The tire blankets are wrapped just over the top of the tires. And with 30 seconds to go, everyone has to be off the grid. So whether it's to the side of the track, left or right, doesn't matter. You have to be off the grid. And then the parade, the green flag lap will start. And then at that point, everyone runs back to their positions, gets their helmets on. Certainly the guys that are involved in the pit stops. And of course, you focus on the TV at that point, making sure that you see if any contact's been made between any of the cars at the start of the race. If there has, you then make a decision on whether you want to change the nose, keep the nose on, or wait until you do your stop. Also, a huge amount of focus on the weather as well. There seems to be just Monza being Monza this time of year. You tend to get afternoon showers, so you'll be looking at the weather, but of course you get these little pockets that start popping up prior to the race, and then of course off you go. Start of the race happens, and you've got your plan, and then you try and stick to your plan. Obviously, things change, and then you have to adapt to what comes up. But yeah, the last 10 minutes is pretty frantic, but there is all procedures for it. So although it ticks away pretty quickly, everyone knows exactly what they should be doing, and it's pretty functional.
That's pretty cool. I love the insight that you can give us with that. And I saw Bob, he was doing the same thing I was doing, is smiling as you talk about the people running and all the different steps. That's very exciting. We're actually watching that on TV. What were you going to say, Les?
No, I was just checking out the action. It's, exactly as you said. Everybody's kind of in the last minute adjustments and the last minute prep in this. It's always fun. I had the opportunity to walk down the grid myself and to see this a couple of different times, the way teams do much the same thing, but there's little things, and then you got the drivers who do different things. Daniel Ricciardo sitting over there, kneels down in his frog position, and he's doing all kinds of stretches there at the end. Was one of the ones that I recall.
Guys, if I can interrupt, we just saw on the pre-race feed, I think it's Yuki Tsunoda's AlphaTauri being pushed back to the garage. I don't know quite what's going on there.
Oh yeah,
that can't be good. But to your point, Les, I was watching earlier, and drivers, as Dave knows better than any of us, have some pretty weird superstitions and pre-race routines sometimes. We just saw Lando Norris, who does a fist bump with every member of his crew out on the starting grid. He even chases some of these guys down because they're doing something else, but he wants apparently to get that fist bump with every member of the crew, which is fun.
Dave, what's the strangest you've seen?
Strangest, I've not in Formula One, but I've seen an Italian driver put salt around the car in Pau in France. That was probably the strangest one. He told me he was going to win the next day.
Okay.
He went straight in the wall. But yeah, I mean, the routines are normally like I think Grosjean only used to get in on the left-hand side. Stuff like that. You know, putting the gloves on once they're strapped in. just routines. It's just like us, isn't it? You have certain routines for certain things, and if you change something and something goes wrong, you blame your routine, I guess. But
yeah, it's like an NBA player getting up to shoot free throws, all the crazy routines they go through. But hey, Bob, I want to ask you. We got about 3 minutes left, but you had some really good stats in our show document about Monza and all the speed things primarily. But yeah, talk us about some of those. Those are great.
Well, Monza is by far the track you find most often when you're checking the speed records in Formula One. The place is just a flat-out blast for most of the lap. And the aerodynamic setups and the steering setups and all that sort of thing changed to accommodate those tremendous speeds. The ironic thing is that Monza used to have the highest posted top speed in a Formula One race. I think it was, I don't know, Juan Pablo Montoya. At any rate, that's not the case now because Valtteri Bottas in Mexico in 2019, I believe, went 231 miles an hour and change in the speed trap. I think the best we've seen at Monza is in the high 220s.
But they're cheating. They don't have any. There's no molecules in the air up there.
It's crazy. But Monza it's fast. It needs to be respected. I think 17 or 18 of the fastest races in Formula One history have been there. And of course, there's that aerodynamic effect of the toe that you talked about before. There have been slipstream races, as they're called, where guys just tuck in nose to tail for the extra speed you get by drafting along. And that can result in chorus line finishes sometimes. If enough cars survive to the final corner before the checkered flag, they could be 5 wide. It's happened in the past.
Well, and we also saw proof of some of this yesterday when Lewis Hamilton could not get around Lando Norris. Yep. And, that's clearly you would have said virtually most any place that, that Lewis is going to get around Lando, but it did not happen yesterday. So, I mean, this could really prove interesting today. You kind of expect that Max Verstappen could just really walk away with this today. So now that I've said that, though, we can ensure that's not going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen at Turn 1 ever in any Formula One race, so we'll see what happens. And Bob, that's one of your stats. Pole is more important here. 15 winners from 2000 to 2020. So that's a pretty telling stat. But we are now out of time. But stay tuned to this channel because the race itself is being broadcast by the BBC, and we'll have that feed here next. And then stick with us after the race because we'll have our 1-hour post-race show with Bob Varsha, Dave O'Neill, myself, and Les Kaiser, and I think we'll have to give away some tickets to the United States Grand Prix in the post-race show. So write down the phone number, 512-643-5483. Give us a call after the race. Thanks for tuning in.
Ciao, y'all.